4th, 2017 has now been called to order. We will have the invocation and pledge of allegiance by Mr. Brain, my Vice President. Would you please stand at this time? Also at this time, I would ask that we would all take a moment of silence. Mr. Dalton Langford, who's a really good friend of ours, wife, Miss Linda, passed away this morning. Thank you.
Father God, we just love you. We thank you for this day. We thank you for all you many blessings that you lay upon each and every one of our lives, Father. We just ask that you be with us tonight as we make decisions, Father, that you just give us wisdom and discernment, Father, and just that the decisions we make tonight, Father, please you. God, we lift up those everyone that lives in South Texas or anywhere along the coast, Father. We just ask for that you be with them, protect them, Father, during the upcoming days and this area also, Father, for we don't know the impact of it yet. But just ask for a protection upon everyone, Father, as this storm comes on shore. God, we lift you up, give you praise. We ask these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may proceed with roll call, Madam Secretary. Here. 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 Thank you, Madam Secretary. We have a few housekeeping items we would like to take care of at this time. For those of you that have cell phones or any type of pagers, we ask that you would put those devices to silence so that we can conduct our meeting. And if there's anyone that has anything that they would like to talk about on any of the items that is on tonight's agenda, we ask that you would fill out the blue slip in the rear of the room and bring that slip to Miss Jessica or either Miss Kathy, and we'll make sure and put you on the agenda. With that being said, we'll proceed to item number 4. Presentation of certificate to Mr. Henry P. Fontenot, Jr.
Harry.
for being Harris. I'm sorry. Harry. Mr. Harry P. Fontenot, Jr. for being awarded the 2016 Trustees of Freedom Lifetime Achievement Award by the Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Ms. Trimming.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a little article that I need to read because I can't remember everything that Harry has done. Maybe he can't even remember everything that he's done for our community and for Louisiana. The Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers has awarded Calcasieu and Cameron Parish District Attorney Defender Harry P. Fontenot, Jr. its 2016 Trustee of Freedom Lifetime Achievement Award. Mr. Fontenot is a lifelong resident of Calcasieu Parish, has served the parish as a public defender for 21 years. He became Deputy District Defender in 2006 and was made District Defender of Calcasieu and Cameron parishes in 2013. He is a 1993 cum laude graduate at McNeese State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice, and in 1996, magna cum laude graduate of Southern University Law Center, where he was a law review candidate and earned the Becknell Scholarship of Academic Achievement. He graduated from the National Criminal Defense College at the Law School of Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, and Walden and Platt Standardized Field Sobriety Training Institute. Mr. Fontenot is a member of Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the Southwest Bar Association. He served the Committee of Juvenile Defense and wrote the statewide standards for presenting parents in child in need of care cases. He was the 2011 recipient of the Louisiana State Bar Association Children's Award. Mr. Fontenot serves on the Calcasieu Parish Family and Youth Planning Board and the Contraband Days Board. He is immediate past president of the Parish Executive Committee of the Republican Party in Calcasieu and the current member of the District 30E of the Louisiana Republican State Central Committee. He is also active in several fraternity organizations as a perpetual member and past master of Sulfur Lodge Free and Accepted Masons, Benton Lodge Free and Accepted Masons, past and potentate of Habibi Shriners, and has served many years as the Shrine Center attorney for the Shriners. Harry, I don't know how you've done all that, but you're amazing. And on behalf of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, as a certificate of recognition presented by the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury on this day, the 24th day of August, 2017, to Mr. Harry P. Fontenot, Jr., in honor and recognition and being awarded the 2016 Trustee of Freedom Lifetime Achievement Award by the Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Congratulations on a job well done, and keep up the good work. Thank you. You might want to say something.
Thank you, Sandy. Mr. President, honorable police jurors, thank you. Success doesn't occur in a vacuum. My staff is the best staff I could ever imagine. Some of them are here. I'd like to thank them. And I accepted this award when I got it on their behalf. This police jury has always supported us. You have recognized the importance of public defense in this parish. You have done everything you could do to help us to uphold the Constitution, and I thank you. Thank you very much.
At this time, I would like to pull item number 13. And item number 13 requires no action for tonight's meeting. Item number 13 has been pulled. Item number 13 requires no action for tonight's meeting. The Planning and Zoning Board met on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017, and unanimously voted to approve the staff's recommendation to postpone consideration of the matters indefinitely with no recommendations from the board.
Do we need a motion? Do the last part, no action.
No action required
Okay.
for this item. We will now move back to item number 5. Take appropriate actions on applications for liquor and beer permits. Mr. Crane.
Mr. President, we have 2 applications before you
So
tonight.
moved.
We recommend that they be approved.
I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Barris. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 6.
Move on 6.
Consideration approving payments of all current invoices and advise regarding monthly budget to actual comparisons on general funds and other financial statements, major funds. I have a motion by Mr. Andrepont and a second by Mr. Collins. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 7, consideration of approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the police jury dated July 13th, 2017. I have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Mr. Guillory. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 8, consideration of approving the parish-wide drainage liaison committee report dated August 8th, 2017. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Parish-wide Drainage Liaison Committee met on Tuesday, August 8th, and received a report from the staff on additional proposed revisions to Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances. These revisions were developed based on review and feedback from the public and designed to simplify the requirements for runoff management plan waivers, reduce survey requirements to accommodate new technology, revise grading plan requirements and build-out, and address fill restrictions for non-RMP developments to prevent new development from causing problems for neighboring structures. These latest proposed revisions were posted to the police jury's website immediately following the committee meeting for public review and comment. Based on feedback from the public, the committee voted to revise its original timeline for ordinance revisions to provide an extended period for additional input through the end of September. The new timeline projects a Drainage Committee meeting on October 5th, followed by action by the Planning and Zoning Board on October 17th, and the full police jury on October 19th. Several persons appeared before the committee, including representatives for the Alliance for Positive Growth, the City of Sulfur, and the general public, in support of the extended timeline and the need for further study and input. That is my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Move to receive report.
I have a motion by Vice President Brame and a second by Mr. Landry. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 9, consideration of approving the Budget Committee report dated August 24th, 2017. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Budget Committee met today at 5 p.m. and recommended approval of the following grants for the gaming fund. Ward 2 Community Center Playground District Number 7 of Ward 2, $10,000 for the costs associated with professional architect services of the Bell City Ball Field and playground equipment. Ward 4, District 15, Gravity Drainage District Number 5 of Ward 4, $16,000 for costs associated with the installation of underground drainage on Horseshoe Lane in Maplewood. C, Ward 5, Community Center and Playground District Number 5 of Ward 5, $105,000 for the costs associated with the purchase of the ball field and playground equipment. D, Ward 6, Fire Protection District Number 1, $50,000 for the costs associated with the purchase of an extraction tool and rescue equipment. E, Ward 8, Water Works District Number 8 of Ward 3 and 8, $17,500 of the costs associated with the purchase of a pickup truck and a utility line locator. 4, consideration of making a recommendation with reference to approving a cooperative endeavor agreement between the Police Jury and Waterworks District Number 7 of Ward 4 and 6 for grants in the amount of $50,000, $21,000 from Ward 4, District 11, and $29,000 from Ward 6 for the water line upgrades project on Bud Bennett Road. 5, consideration of making a recommendation with reference to approving a cooperative endeavor agreement between the Police Jury and Waterworks District Number 9 of Ward 4 for a grant in the amount of $25,000, 15 from the Ward 4 District 12, 5 from the Ward 4 District 15, and $5,000 from the Ward 4 for funding associated towards the purchase of digital meters. That is my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. White.
Second.
Move to
I have a
receive
motion by
report.
Mr. White and a
Whatever.
second by Mr. Latour. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 10, consideration of adopting an ordinance to amend Chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinance of Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana, specifically Division 5 Corridor Overlay District.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Guillory and a second by Mr. Latour, and we do have discussion on this item.
Anybody?
Huh?
Okay. You have this.
We have some speakers
I'd like them to go first.
on this item. At this time, would Mr., I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. White, you have the floor.
But just the revisions to the ordinance took place with a committee of police jurors, planning and zoning, and others with staff. We worked very hard on putting the responses that we've got to this ordinance into place, took it all in, seen what everybody's concerns was on this, and really felt like we've done a job for where smaller companies could come in and still not carry the full burden of where the ordinance was prior. Like I said, the revisions I fully support, and that's about all I have to say about it right now.
Thank you, Mr. White. Also, I need a correction. Mr. Guillory just asked that he would go ahead and put you as
Thank you.
motion on that item, and we appreciate you doing that, Mr. Guillory. And at this time, we would ask that Mr. Adam Johnson come forth, please. Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Mr. President, as Mr. Johnson comes up, how many speakers do we have?
We have 3. Can you give me a timeline?
I would suggest 4 minutes.
4 minutes, Mr. Adam.
Okay, how are y'all?
Good.
My
We're
name is
good.
Adam Johnson. My address is currently 335 Natchez Drive, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 70611. I'm a resident of Moss Bluff for a little while. I just moved there, back there from Lake Charles. In any event, I want to thank you guys for all your service. It's my understanding there's kind of been some history with this 6471, this zoning ordinance. And maybe during those kind of exchanges, there were some kind of, maybe the message wasn't delivered just exactly the right way. And so I think it's important just kind of lead off with that and suggest that that kind of has been a distraction. I think that everyone's heart is in the right place with respect to beautification. But I think that any time someone owns a piece of property and government does something that specifically takes money out of their pocket with respect to off-premise advertising and with respect to what will be required in the event a catastrophic event happens and it's necessary that they rebuild, I think anytime you add cost on small businesses after a catastrophic event, which is a time when they'll need help and not additional costs, and anytime you limit a property owner's ability to make money off of his property in what was a legal way just a few years, or just a year ago, that's a problem. And so I think what's appropriate under the circumstances is that, and I don't know if y'all have authority to do this, or whether it has to, I'm a lawyer, I should know this, probably should have looked this up before I got here, had a long day, but anyways, what I would, if it could be amended, okay, to add in the changes, the amendment suggests, or it opens Highway 171 back up for off-premise advertising, but does so, and it increases the state regulation of 500 feet to make it 2,000 feet. That's essentially lip service. 2,000 feet is going to all but eliminate the same people that the original ordinance restricted in the first place. So I believe that Highway 378 should be added to the amendment in addition to Highway 171, and that the regulation ought to exist as current state law, which is 500 feet in between the two. And I think that that's a perfectly reasonable request from property owners in Moss Bluff who live on those routes and who have invested in that property. As far as the restrictions on what businesses will have to rebuild in terms of the regulations that are required once they have to rebuild, I think it's imperative that we not add cost to businesses, especially in the event of a catastrophic injury. I mean, a catastrophic event, because you're literally adding insult to injury, and I think that's the last thing that small business owners need in that moment. Again, I know my time's limited. I'm not used to that. I'm used to being extremely long-winded, as you can tell. But I think that's an appropriate amendment. So if we could add those two things, that would be great. If this thing has to be tabled to go back to committee for those two additions to be considered, then that's what is appropriate under the circumstances. Despite the back and forth from a lot of people, angry property owners, your property rights are not something you're having to explain. They're just yours. I don't have to explain why I want to make money off my property. It's my property. I feel like it's personal to people. And when that's the case, I think it's just imperative that reasonable requests in terms of beautification be considered, and I think those two requests are extremely reasonable and should be considered by the police jury. I thank you guys for your service again. Hey, what up, man? Congratulations. Anyways, thank you guys very, very much.
Mr. Johnson.
All right.
Are there any comments by the jurors? Speaker number 2. My next speaker is Greg. I'm having a hard time understanding that last name. Can you pronounce that for us? Swiniker. Please come up, state your name and address for the record, sir.
After all the speakers are...
How y'all doing tonight? My name's Greg Schwinnaker, 319 Sid Lane, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 70611. You won't have to worry about giving me a time limit. I'm just up here to state that I'm against the extreme regulations that y'all are opposing on this ordinance here, and I just thought I would make it a point to get up here and tell y'all that I do oppose and against the extreme regulations. So I would hope that y'all would maybe think this over again before y'all, make it final. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Swinick. If you would stay there for just a minute, we have some jurors that have a few comments. Mr. Landry?
I just want to make sure that what you understand, what's on the agenda tonight is relaxing the regulations.
Right.
To make them,
Right, but it's still, to me, too much, I mean,
well, then I agree to disagree.
okay, that's
Thank you.
fine.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. Andrew Point?
Thank you, Mr. President. Why are you against it?
Why I'm against it? Because, I know one person, I grew up in Moss Bluff. Okay, I saw it come from a two-lane road down 378, and, in fact, when I was born, it was, if I remember right, it was gravel. And there's people that own, I know one man, well, he just deceased, but he has a half-acre lot on 378, and he told me because of these regulations, he would not be able to do anything with that lot because it's too small.
I was just curious.
Yeah,
okay.
I just wanted to come up here and state that to me, it's just kind of like all the stuff going on in the government now. We can get too many regulations, and I know y'all are, what he said was y'all are taking some away. Making it better, but still in the same, it's, we still have too many regulations.
Well, the reason I ask is I don't live in Moss Bluff, so I don't know the issues that go on day
Right.
by day, week by week, month by month. And I usually try to rely, I've been here a long time, and I usually try to rely on the recommendation of the juror that represents that area. And I know you came up and you just said that it wasn't going to take a lot of time, that you were against it, but it's imperative, I think, that we know why you're against it. It's just saying, I can say I'm against you, see, but why?
Right. Well, it's a lot of, Calcasieu Parish is, like I said, I've seen it change a lot.
Yes.
And it just,
I have too.
and not just, I was trying to speak on this one, the number 10, but it's overall, over the years, they're just taking more and more control over everything.
Okay.
And that's what I'm against.
I respect your
Okay,
position.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Swiniker. Is there any more comments by the jury? Sorry, Mr. White?
I want to kind of go back to Adam's statement, now that I've had time to process this and really think about it. A board was created for when a loss of a business happened, and they have to rebuild, and it causes a hardship. We all know that. A small business owner can't lose their business and then come back and build to the ordinance. But there have been steps put in place by the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury to allow a person to come in, get in front of a board, let them hear their hardships, and then move forward with that. We have things in place for people to reopen their businesses. This is not that they're going to lose their business and Katie bar the doors, it's closed. It's not that away. So there is things put in place. Off-premise signs, 378, if everybody's lived in Moss Bluff that's here to speak tonight, they already know that 378 is clustered up with signs as we speak. Only real road that can allow any more signs, and I agree there needs to be signs on 171, because there's a dark area on that road that my daughter breaks down on that side of the highway. There's no lights there. There's going to have some kind of light from these billboard signs. So, yes, and that's how we all came out with that 2,000 feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Our third speaker on the evening. Would Mr. Randall Hood come forth, please? Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
My name's Randall Hood, 560 Donna Drive, Moss Bluff, Louisiana, 70611. Heard all this talk about ordinances up there. I've spoke to a lot of people in Moss Bluff. Majority of Moss Bluff, talk to them about incorporating as a city, and they start screaming, we don't want all these ordinances. Do you really think they want these ordinances? No. They don't really realize the ordinances they're under. I've got a 75-year-old widow that lives across the street from me. The backyard landscape police got her. Her neighbor complained about grass too high in her backyard flower bed. Y'all's administration sent somebody out to look at her backyard while we're flooding, which is absolutely ridiculous. I've spoke to a number of people about these ordinances. This ordinance goes all the way up to Beauregard Parish line on 171. That's ridiculous. You look around at any city in Calcasieu Parish, there's businesses popping up everywhere. No new businesses popping up in Moss Bluff. Y'all choked Moss Bluff to death. The voters will speak in a couple of years. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hood.
I just ask the jury to remember that there's corridor standards in Lake Charles that are much more restrictive than this, and there's one business after another that have opened up in those corridors. And as I said before, the problem in Moss Bluff is there's no sewage. That's a problem. We all know that.
Sir, we'll get to you. Mr. Landry speaking now.
He's out of order, and his time's up.
Mr. President.
And I'm not going to allow him to interrupt me.
Well, some people
Mr.
call
President,
landscaping grass
Mr.
growing in
President.
cracks in their concrete.
Mr. President, we're getting a little far afield from where the agenda item is. We're here to talk about some amendments to this ordinance, and political statements and those kind of things are really not allowed or in line. I know we have one speaker left, and I just wanted to chime in there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sam. Are you finished, Mr. Landry?
Yes.
Because you had the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, then.
I'm done.
We have another speaker, Mr. Dan Rose. Please state your name and address for the record, sir. And Mr. Rose, we'd ask that the comment state to the item that we're speaking on tonight, sir.
Dan Rhodes, 290 North Perkins Ferry Road, Lake Charles. Y'all are probably going to pass this thing, what you've done, which is minor, very minor changes. There's one good change in it I see concerning the limestone, where you're not requiring the limestone parking lot completely limestone. I think you're only requiring from the front corner of the buildings to out to the road concrete. I still don't agree with a lot of that, and I see that I believe y'all are giving variances where there's actually people, you're letting them use limestone. I ask that you consider what has been brought forth to you tonight on these people being able to rebuild that have existing businesses and build to code. You know, I'm against regulations, but they should be able to build to code. We shouldn't have to come to you and ask to build a code. We should be able to rebuild according to the rest of the parish, not singled out with all these regulations. And if you don't allow these changes we've asked for, I would ask for a complete repeal of it. If you don't do that, I would like to know, for Ward 1 citizens, can we have a vote on this? That's my one question I have. Can somebody answer that?
I'll refer that to legal counsel. Mr. Sam?
Mr. President, the jury sets the ordinances. The ordinances are the law that you guys place into effect. You're elected to do that job, and you do that well. And everything goes into consideration here. So an item like that would not be something that would be put to a vote.
That answer would be no, Mr. Rose.
Okay, so in other words, is that because it's going to cost too much? It's going to cost tax dollars? What if Moss Bluff citizens would agree to pay for this election? It wouldn't cost the parish any tax dollars. Would you agree to that?
It's just not an item that serves for an election. No.
No, again.
You wouldn't allow for that?
No.
I thought that. That's all I have.
I doubt the state law would allow that.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. My next speaker is Mr. Harry Shaheen. Please come forth, state your name and address for the record, sir.
Good afternoon, Harry Shaheen. I'm actually from DeQuincy. I have businesses in Moss Bluff on 171 in Joe Miller Road and 378 North Perkins Ferry Road. Moss Bluff has been wonderful to me and my family, and so is the police jury. I'm here to express an opinion about kind of where we're going with this and maybe offer some suggestions. My companies do approximately $8 to $10 million a year in Moss Bluff. I built those stores personally. Not only did I build them and borrow money to build them, but I picked up sledgehammers and I drove the 2x4s in the ground and laid the concrete. I live on a farm and I like to work, and that's kind of the way I do things. The restrictions that are being placed on us as business owners is getting horrendous. Those two locations probably pay taxes in some form of another of probably $3 million of the $10 million in gross revenues that we take in. I recently did an addition to a store over there, reinvested a couple of $100,000, had to put a new $50,000 sewer system because the health department said the one that I have would not work. The costs continue to grow. I would love to give more money to my employees. I had to come up here for an exemption to put a pricing sign that flashed every 10 seconds to say that I was going to offer a discount for cash instead of a credit card, which actually costs us a tremendous amount of money. The point that I'm trying to make is, at some point in time, I don't think we need to do this from a regulatory standpoint. It needs to be done from the community. It should be market-induced. If we want people to come here to Calcasieu Parish, the community's going to do those things. I've got landscaping. I have more landscaping coming in. That's why we have a free market system. We do not have to create these ordinances for us to get where we want. And that's what offends the people so much. This is America. That's their land, and they have freedom to do the best that they can do with it, with the resources they have. I would like to see regulatory agencies to think of new solutions with the community to provide these services that everybody wants, because everybody wants what's good for the community. But the regulatory nature of the way that it works, it's just not working. It creates division. So I would sure like to see a step back 10 feet. Let's take another look at this. Let the community get together. We have an organization called APG. We meet all the time. We address these issues. We have mastermind groups. We talk about them. So anyway, I think it's the wrong direction to go. It's not what we need to improve our community. It comes from within. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shaheen. We have a few jurors that would like to, we have one more speaker that, okay. Mr. Andrew, I'll go ahead and let you speak while.
Well, I want to address Mr. Crane.
Yes, sir.
How much time was allocated to this ordinance, and who all was consulted to reach the decision that you reached?
Mr. Andrew, we on June the 20th, we introduced it to the Planning and Zoning Board. Now, before that, we had gone before the Planning and Zoning Liaison Group, and even before that, we had discussions. So from that day to now, it's been what, 9-10 weeks or so? And we did send out. We sent the ordinance to the developers group that the gentleman mentioned. We also sent to the Ward 1 Economic Development District that's up there, and we received a positive response from them.
Mr. Andrew Pont, if I may, to better answer your question, you're speaking of the changes, and he may, if you would, go back even further of how much time was spent on the
I'm sorry.
ordinance.
No, what I want to know is,
Or tell him
at
both.
what point did you come to the decision of what's written in black and white here, and who was consulted, and were they notified? Because I'm getting different vibes here this afternoon. I'm hearing one thing from the general public that's out there, and I'm hearing another thing from y'all, okay? When I say y'all, I'm talking about Kevin and you, okay? What makes it bad is, and the reason I'm asking that is, it makes it bad since I was not involved in reaching the final decision. You follow where I'm coming from? And yet these people show up tonight and object to this, and there's got to be a reason for them to object to it. Did they have input along the way or not?
Well, we've certainly reached out to try to allow, anybody to give input. That's why we have it out on public comment.
Well, when you say public comment, where did you publicize that? On net?
Well, the whole document has been on our website, the Calcasieu Parish website. We advertised it in the paper. Again, we sent these the changes to those groups that I just mentioned. And so, now, that's what we did.
Well, what concerns me is that, and I can't speak for anybody else, but I feel like it kind of puts me behind the 8 ball, and I'm having to make a decision predicated on what y'all are recommending, and yet these people show up and say, it ain't good for Moss Bluff.
Right.
I mean, there's a disconnect somewhere, I guess is what I'm trying to tell you, Wes.
Right, I understand.
Let me refer to legal counsel right quick.
Yeah.
Sam.
Mr. President, let's make a comment, and Wes can correct if I'm wrong on this, but I don't know that everybody who's speaking is actually in opposition to what you guys are doing tonight. We're rolling back and making these things more lenient. I think
Right.
if they're asked the question, they'll go along with this. They just want to have some more, and that's not on the agenda for tonight.
Exactly.
All that's on the agenda is the rollback of some of these regulations and requirements you guys have imposed already.
I agree.
Years ago.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that comment, that I don't know that everybody who's spoken is really in opposition to what you're doing tonight.
Exactly.
That's all I had.
Thanks for that clarification, Mr. Gabb. Go ahead, Mr. Crane.
Well, what I was going to say is just to follow up, I know that there's a group that wants to repeal the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, of course, Mr. White has received that. We've sat down with anybody, and we've asked, if Mr. White, if that needs to be repealed, and it's our recommendation not to do that. We feel like this ordinance will improve those corridors with commercial development and raise some value in those commercial areas.
Is it consistent with the rest of the parish?
We do have the Nelson Overlay District, and we have the Lake Street Overlay District. The Nelson is probably the most stringent of those districts. We feel like this, the regulations in this particular overlay district is fair, and that's why we're here tonight. We're actually listening to some of those, the people that have provided comment to relax some of those. And so that's what is before you tonight.
Well, I hate to put it this way, but it's a situation where I don't feel I can win. Either way I vote, it's going to be wrong, And I realize y'all are hired to make these decisions, and I'm not saying you just throw something together overnight. You don't do that. I've been here a long time, and I know how you operate, Wes. And it just that I'm a little bit confused, and I think council has answered part of that. But if they're not sticking to the ordinance, what are they talking about? And that's my next question. To repeal the whole thing, is that what you're getting out of that? I'm not trying to belabor the issue. I'm just trying to get to a point of justifying my vote.
Again, Mr. Anderson, I'm not sure. We have folks here tonight that are making public comments about that. I feel like we have reached out to the community and provided, given the allowance for public comment.
Did you get any?
Well, we received an official comment from the Ward 1 Economic Board.
And they agree with you?
And they were positive about it.
Okay.
And so, now, the comments that you're hearing tonight, that's public comment too, but.
Yeah. Well, like Chris said, we'll agree to disagree to some degree, I guess. I don't know. Like I say, I'm totally confused, which is not hard to happen.
I think there's been general comment about regulation, and I think Mr. Johnson made a specific request to change, the spacing requirement. That's something that could be considered, but there has been comment tonight about just in general regulation. Now,
Okay, well, let
I
me
don't
ask-
really know how to answer that.
Again, I don't want to belabor this, but let me ask you, I got to get these things straight in my head. Y'all omitted 378, and he said include 378. Why was 378 omitted?
I'm not following what you mean.
Well, the ordinance is for 171, am I correct?
I think he's talking about the signage.
Yeah, the signage.
Yes.
There was, we're allowing for off-premise signage only on Highway 171,
Okay, and he asked
not 378.
for 378 to be included in that, but that's not included.
No, sir.
Well, I'm going to shut up. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Antrefont. I'll move to Mr. White.
Mr. Antrefont, I'll answer some of your questions. I felt the same way you did as far as getting public comment back. After we met, Planning and Zoning met, it passed unanimously in Planning and Zoning. I went back to staff and asked, how many comments did we get on this? They weren't getting many. It's okay. So it came in front of the police jury. We didn't get many comments. Went back to staff. What are we gonna do? We're not getting the comments that I really feel that we need from our community. I said, push it back. That's why we're meeting tonight for final approval. We pushed this meeting, this should have been done 2 to 3 weeks ago. We pushed it back because of comment period. Allow more. And we showed up tonight, we got 3 or 4 or 5 people here. Moss Bluff right now, with the residents that we have, once the new census comes out, we're gonna have 20,000 people in Moss Bluff. Have we heard from all 20,000 people? I mean, there's a lot of people live there. The fact of new businesses not coming to Moss Bluff, we got a new development happen with Sherman-Williams. We actually got a group with us tonight in the audience that are building, I can't tell you the cost of their new development for the plaza, but it's coming to Moss Bluff as well. We had to work with that group, just like we'd work with any other business that comes to Moss Bluff. That's why we've created the board to work with them. I really felt like we had enough comment period. You don't know how many phone calls I've got that why are we relaxing it? Because I felt like, and the rest of the staff and the people who sat through that liaison group felt like that we need to relax it some so small businesses could open and take some of the burden off of them. And that's how we've come up with the addition, or the amendments to this ordinance.
Well, I appreciate your comments. It does help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Forner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think everybody kind of knows where I stand on these overlay districts. I think it's not that I'm against them, I think there's a place for them. Brand-new corridors that you want to raise to a certain standard is one thing, but when you try to blend a corridor into an already existing atmosphere where you do place a heavy burden on the property owners to have to rebuild their property. I mean, I think it's raised to 75%, but you take a place that burns to the ground, they'll never be able to do it. And they're at the mercy of a board that can arbitrarily decide one direction or another, whether they're allowed to build back to the code that exists at that time. So the only reason I would support this tonight is because it is relaxing the regulations that are placed on the citizens there. I would like to see an exemption given to the businesses that exist, that burden will be placed on them. I would support changing the off-premise signs to what the state regulations are. We don't need to exceed that. I think we ought to match what they do. I mean, they're the ones that set the regulations on the state highways, so I don't know why we would go overboard to step up and eliminate new signs. So I think, I'll support the change tonight because it is relaxing them, but I would consider repealing that ordinance altogether. We did it on Highway 27 in Corliss because it just flat didn't fit that environment. So I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forner. I have another speaker, this time with Mr. Ralph Lewing come forth. Just for clarification, Mr. Crane.
Yes, sir.
Don't we have case-by-case scenarios when we have things like this that come before the jury, when these type things happens for a place of business that burns or whatever? Isn't it case-by-case that we look at these
Sure.
situation?
And like Mr. White indicated, there is a provision in the ordinance that allows for anyone to ask for, some sort of relief, and it would be reviewed, obviously, on a case-by-case basis. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Crane.
And
Go ahead, Mr. Gabb.
President, as Mr. Lewin comes up, maybe to avoid some confusion, maybe the question should be posed to Mr. Lewin. What about the ordinances, the changes you guys are making tonight? Does Mr. Lewin agree or disagree with? I mean, that might set the right tone for the comments to be made.
Okay. All right. Did you understand what Mr. Gabb said, Mr. Lewin?
No, I just want to comment on the whole situation.
Okay. Just give me your name and address for the record, and you can
Ralph
proceed.
Lewing, 2001 Charvet Drive, Lake Charles, Louisiana.
You may proceed.
A lot of these people at the police jury here know that I've been a big proponent of overlay districts because of the success I've seen in other areas, because of building in other areas in other states where overlay districts really made, they were very successful. And so the Nelson Road Overlay District, I was a very big proponent of it, one of the most vocal advocates of it. And I can't say that, some of the property owners on that Nelson Road corridor, I mean, they were ready to tar and feather me when I left that meeting that night. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's been good, especially, for property owners and the stakeholders and the people that have property on Nelson Road, me being one of them. So, ordinances and have their place. And the difficulty with Moss Bluff is not like any place other in the United States. It's probably one of the largest non-incorporated communities in the country. And it has presented issues for Calcasieu Parish over the years. It wasn't that many years ago that we couldn't swim in the Calcasieu Lake or the river because there was no regulation on the sewage overflow for Moss Bluff. At one time, Moss Bluff was the largest pollutant of the Calcasieu estuary. We couldn't eat oysters because it went all the way down to Big Lake. Ordinances had to be passed. Parish had to do something to change that. And because it wasn't affecting just Moss Bluff, it was affecting everybody south of Moss Bluff, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico almost. The other thing is that, I always bring this up, and I think it's probably one of the biggest hearted things that our mayor and the respect for Vic Stelly, because I think if Vic Stelly hadn't been involved in it, it wouldn't have happened. But when Super Walmart wanted to build, they wanted to build in Moss Bluff. They wouldn't build in Moss Bluff because Moss Bluff didn't have the infrastructure in place. So they went across the river to Lake Charles, where there was infrastructure. Well, that was the #1 sales tax base for Moss Bluff. So out of the kindness of his heart, the mayor agreed with Vic Stelly to give half of the sales tax base, Super Walmart, to Moss Bluff. Had I been mayor, I probably wouldn't have done that. Because I felt like what we did was we gave them a Band-Aid. We gave them a Band-Aid, which now, every time we talk about trying to improve something in Moss Bluff to make things better, and it's not just, because I'm opposed to regulations too. I own land. I don't like anybody telling me what to do. You guys all know that. You've all had to deal with me at some time or another. But there is quality of life, and there's a future of this parish. And it as much as those guys back there are going to, say something to me when I finish here, you have to take that in consideration. You've got to take in consideration the next generation. And, unfortunately, in this parish, we kind of put that to a side there for a number of years, and now we're paying for it. And I'll throw this little plug in there on the drainage is one thing. But anyway, that's a whole nother issue, and we're doing a good job of getting through that. But I think that in the long haul, that this parish has done a good job of looking at these ordinances. There's nothing that's ever been done here that couldn't be changed. I mean, it's still a free system, it's still America, and we still have our freedoms. So, but, I've talked to people in Moss Bluff, and I met with some people in Moss Bluff, and they are in favor of beautification. They are in favor of improving the aesthetics of Moss Bluff, and especially with the businesses that are wanting to come there. But if you're going to get them there, you're going to have to show them that, you know, you're willing to make some changes too. So, and that's all I got to say. I'm not going to say I'm for this or against it. I know it sounds more like I'm for it, but really you have to take in consideration all the other people involved in this, all the other stakeholders, and you have to take in consideration the ramifications, how it affects the whole parish. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lewin. Is there any other comments by the jury? Madam Secretary, at this time, I'll request that we take a roll call vote on this item.
This will be a reverse roll call.
Can you read the motion as it stands, Madam Secretary?
Yes, sir. The motion is to adopt an ordinance to amend chapter 26 of the Code of Ordinances, specifically Division 5 corridor.
Yes.
Ms. Trini?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Mayo?
No.
Mr. Latour?
Yes.
Mr. Landry?
Yes.
Mr. Guillory?
Yes.
Mr. Farnum?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Brain?
Yes.
Mr. Barris?
Yes.
Mr. Angeloni?
Yes.
Mr. Abshire?
Yes.
Motion carried 12 to 2.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Moving on to item number 12. Take appropriate action on a request by Baggett Investors LLC to rezone from agriculture to single-family.
11.
I missed one, I'm sorry. It's been a while, Mr. Landry. Thank you. I thought, Mr.
It's been a while.
Come on. All right, Mr. Vice President, here we go. Back at number 11. Thank you, Mr. Landry. Take appropriate action on a request by Alvin Stevens to rezone from light commercial to multifamily residential to allow residential development at 1193 North Perkins Ferry Road in Ward 1. Planning and Zoning Board met on Tuesday, August 22nd,
With stipulation.
2017, and voted unanimously to recommend that the request be granted with stipulations. I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. White. Any discussion? Any objection? We do have discussion. Mr. White.
I just want to put on record for this, number 11. If y'all remember, earlier this year, something of this nature came pretty close to this site. Honestly, it's across the road on the east side and a little bit south. It came before the jury, and we did not pass that item at that time. I had a lot of people call me from neighboring streets that was opposed to that development happening at that current lot. Now, this one comes on our agenda, and I've gotten 0 phone calls from the public against it. But I just want it known, as a police sheriff, I have to listen to the public and try to portray their voice as best as I can up here. But nobody said anything about this one, so that's why I'm agreeing with this one tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Is there any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 12. Take appropriate action on request by Baggett Investors LLC to rezone from agriculture to single-family residential to allow single-family residential development
Second.
in the 6500 block of Elliott Road in Ward 3. The Planning and Zoning Board met on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017, and voted unanimously to recommend that the request be granted. I have a motion by Mr. Landry and a second by Mr. Scott. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. 14. Item, thank you, Mr. Landry. I'm gonna have a hard time finding out who's my vice tonight. Moving on to item.
That's
I love him, no, I love him. He know I love him. Moving on to item number 14. Take appropriate action on request by George Clyde to rezone from single-family residential to manufactured home park to recreational vehicle park to allow a recreational vehicle park. 85 spaces at 4400 Highway 27 South in Ward 4. The Planning and Zoning Board met on Tuesday, July the 11th, 2017, and voted unanimously to recommend that the request be granted with stipulations. I have a motion by Mr. Barris and a second by Mr. Andrew Point. Any discussion? We do have discussion. Mr. Fornum?
Is the applicant here tonight?
Is the applicant present tonight?
You would come up to the podium for a minute.
Would you please state your name and address for the record, sir? Thank you.
George Clyde, 4400 Highway 27 South in Sulfur, Louisiana, 60665.
Appreciate you being here tonight. What kind of timeline do you see this thing on, as far as being in operation?
I would say, I know it won't close as far as a sale for at least, I have a month, and then plus I'll live there for another couple months. Then as far as them even starting, I would say, rough guess, beginning of the year at best.
That's when they would start
Yeah.
start construction of the site?
The way it is now as far as selling the property is I'll have at least mid-September plus 2 more months, and then that gets you to October, November, and then, I would estimate for doing anything probably at least beginning of the year.
Okay.
So I would say, how long that takes to build and get all that, I would think middle of next year, maybe, pretty good time on that.
Second question's for Mr. Connor. What is the estimated completion date of the 12/56/27 improvement?
It's around the first of 2019, about another year.
So when?
Got about another year, maybe a year and a month or two.
So it'd be mid to late 18?
I'd say late 18. I don't remember the exact date because it's a working day contract. It's not a calendar day. So weather will have a big impact on the actual completion date, but I would say end of 2018, first of 2019.
We'd be probably nearing completion of the road about the same time they'd be nearing completion of the improvements on that property where somebody could actually occupy it.
And I think as well that I'm not quite sure when, that might be the whole project as far as being finished to where, let's call it Walker Road and North. They're already got half of it done. They're already on the other half digging in. I would say, you might know better than I, but as far as when that section where this is, I would think, and as far as working with DOT, as far as any permit to get, to get there, they're willing to do whatever it takes. If they want them, they make them wait a little while, that's totally done. I think they're very willing to do that.
So that would be maybe even a stipulation you'd be willing to put in on the sales that they couldn't be operational before the road's finished. So we're not dumping traffic into a congested.
I think so, or for sure, which is already in there too, about a stipulation on getting the DOT permit. I mean, that would, either one, really, I think they'd be fine with, but,
I think the timeline's probably gonna work out okay. I'm good, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you,
Mr. Barris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe the last traffic report that we've gotten had a completion date, projected completion date of September of 18. So obviously, there's probably some wiggle room in there, but that was the date that I saw, so somewhere around in there.
Yeah, I think they're definitely be willing to work with that, whatever it be, yes, sir.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 15, consideration of adopting a resolution approving the renewal of the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement between the Police Jury and the State of Louisiana Department of Natural Resources for the 2017-2018 Havasu Parish Local Coastal Program. Mr. Scott, would you have any comments on that for us tonight? All right. I had a motion by Mr. Scott and a second by Mr. Barris. Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 16, consideration of authorizing the Director of the Division of Planning and Development to notify the following property owners to show cause at a public hearing on October 5th, 2017, as to why the structures on the properties as stipulated should be condemned.
Move on 16, all bullets.
Thank you, Mr. Calvin. I'll read those into the record. A, 1037 Kent Hill Road, South Lake Charles area. B, 308 Goodman Road, East Lake Charles area. C, 4569 Goss Ferry Road, Northeast Lake Charles area. D, 674 West Cotton Vinson Road, Corliss area. I had a motion by Mr. Calvin and a second by Mr. Barris. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 17.
Move on 17.
Consideration of adopting a resolution approving a developers agreement between the police jury and Parkway Village Investors LLC for the costs associated with the road design for and road construction related to a commercial development located at Louisiana Highway 378 and Jones Road in Moss Bluff. I have a motion by Mr. White and a second by Mr. Latour. Is there any discussion? Any objection? That motion carried. Moving on to item number 18. Take appropriate actions.
Move on 18.
To abandon and revoke the original dedication of a bridge located at 6745 Highway 27 South Sulfur and adopt a resolution approving an agreement between the police jury and Georgia Constance for the transfer of all future maintenance of the bridge to Gravity Drainage District Number 5 of Ward 4. I have a motion by Mr. Andrew and a second by Mr. Barris. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 19, consideration of adopting a resolution ratifying the execution of and approving subsequent amendments to a rehabilitation construction agreement for reconstruction of the dwelling located at 3205 Highway 90 West Sulphur as a result of grant funding through the Louisiana Housing Corporation for homeowners impacted by Hurricane Katrina and Rita.
So move.
I have a motion by Mr. Guillory and a second by Ms. Trimmy. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 20, consideration of adopting a resolution ratifying the submittal of each of the following items as requested by the Human Service Department. A, approval of a grant agreement for the PY 2017 FY 218 Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act titled One Funding Allocation. B, approval of a grant agreement for the Strategics and Empowerment People STEP STEP program. C, approval of a grant application for a regional coordinated empty program and the permanent supportive housing program. I had a motion by Mr. Latour and a second by, I had a motion by Mr. Guillory. I'm going to list them my vice. I had a motion by Mr. Landry and I had a motion by Mr. Latour and a second by Mr. Landry. You left Mr. Guillory out?
No, he just wants to say something.
Okay, Mr. Guillory has a comment.
Yes, I just want to recognize our Human Services Department, that they really do a great job. They have people coming from other places, Lafayette, throughout the whole state, that come to our Human Services Department to ask them questions about what they're doing and how they're doing such a great job. So I just want to recognize our Human Services Department for doing a great job for the parish and everything. Thank you, Mr. President.
Also, Mr. McMillan?
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to the STEP program, the Strategies to Empower People program. Thank you.
Did I miss that, Mr. McMillan?
Strategic and strategies, there's two different
I'm
words.
sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing some of this tonight, Mr. McMillan. I will do better, sir. Item number 21, consideration of adopting a resolution
21.
approving a submittal of an application sponsor agreement. We have a motion by Mr. Collins and a second by Mr. Barris. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Mr. Landry, you have a comment?
No, I'll take care of McMillan if you want me to.
We'll get him later. We'll get him later.
Offers on the table.
We'll get him later, Mr. Landry. I appreciate it. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 22, consideration of adopting a resolution approving the submittal of a grant application to the Louisiana Governor's Office of Homeland Security and for the Emergency Management Performance Grant. I have a motion by Mr. Farnham and a second by Mr. Barris. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 23, consideration of adopting a resolution approving an amendment to the following architectural engineering services contracts. Okay, Mr. Miller? Okay.
Practice them.
Item number 1, Ellender Architects and Associates LLC for the 14th Judicial District Family and Juvenile Court Project. B, Moss Architects for the Coroner's Office and Crime Lab Project, additional project. I had a motion by Mr. Barris and a second by Mr. Collins. We do have discussion. Mr. Forner?
Thank you, Mr. President. What are we amending? Who can answer that one?
Oh, Mr.
And what's it gonna cost? Roundabout.
Please state your name and position here with the parish, sir.
Dean Kelly, Director of Facilities.
Does it all.
We are, as it says, amending the architect and engineering contracts. When these projects started, so you have to start somewhere, right?
Absolutely.
And now that we've gone through and we've studied the programming and we have all that pretty well figured out, we need to amend these contracts to make sure we have the scope of work in line. That's what we're doing.
We kind of give them a little, a contract to get started and scope the project out a little bit, and then, once it gets a little more developed,
Exactly. So,
you have to go to the next step.
Right.
And do a little better job of making sure it's, budgeted right, so that you have a good
Exactly.
number to budget.
so with the Family Juvenile Court, we originally started out looking at the existing JDC, and then also we looked at the Magnolia Building and looked at connections to see what all we could do and how we would come about building this new facility and connecting to the old. All those studies have been done. We also recently completed an operational study, so we better understand the entire operation, and now we know what we need to do, so the picture is much more clear. We need to amend these contracts so that we can move forward.
Fair enough. That's a good idea. It'd be even better if it was kind of spelled into the agenda where the public could see. It's kind of a broad statement that we're just amending a contract, so if we could put a little more detail in the agenda where somebody's reading it, to see that kind of thing, we wouldn't have to put Mr. Kelly on the spotlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forner. Is there any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Item number 24, take appropriate actions on bid
Move on
quotes and/or
24, A and B.
proposals received by the parish purchasing agent for the following. Let me read those into the record.
And
Mr.
C,
Lee.
A, B, and C.
A, B, and C. A,
How about D? A, B, C, and D.
You need to borrow Kevin's glasses?
I need his glasses.
proposal for the community service block grant, community partnership and service in education, employment, and income management. B, quotes for the 14th District Court improvement projects. And
That works.
C, 901 Lakeshore Drive parking garage overlay project. D, one mid-size sports utility vehicle. We have comment. Mr. Landry. We had a motion by Ms. Trimmy and a second by Mr. Barris on all bullets, but we do have discussion. Mr. Landry.
Thank you, Mr. President. On item C,
C,
901 Lakeshore Drive Parking Garage Overlay Project. So we are going to do maintenance on that parking garage?
Yes, sir, Mr. Landry, and I actually asked Mr. Kelly to come back up to the podium and
Yeah, because he's going to have to explain that, because whenever we're in discussions about where our new parking garage is going to go and all of that, why spend money on this one? Maybe the thing to do is tear that one down.
you have the floor, Mr. Kelly.
I mean, I don't think we've made that decision. I mean,
This is
just
a maintenance
this is
project
to,
to the existing parking garage there that's connected to the 901 building. It's in good shape. It's not it doesn't need to be torn down. So as far as the overlay word stuck in there, we probably could have gone with maintenance a little better, but to fix the surface, there will be an overlay of the entire parking surface along with other maintenance items. That a little better?
I mean, it is, but we're gonna I guess, there's no doubt it's gonna stay there.
Just to make,
In all the different scenarios that we've looked at.
Mr. Landry, if I could, Mr. Beaman, in all different scenarios, yes, that garage, which is located to the 901 building, will stay there. It will remain.
Regardless of where we decide the other ones are gonna go.
That's correct. Now, the Magnolia parking garage is the one that will be taken down for the family and juvenile court.
On this side,
Okay.
No.
I just don't wanna,
giving direction.
we do this and
Yes.
then
On this side.
a year from now, we decide that we're going in that direction.
Mr. Landry, it's a good question, because in addition to those, there's the parking lot across the street from this structure that we commonly call the 901 parking lot. That's yet another one, so I appreciate you asking to clarify this, though. This one has never been in doubt that we're gonna need this. Whatever has to be done outside of it, this is more of it is a parking garage, it's just not as big as the other one, but.
Was it like two-story?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Or
Or
technically
three?
It's actually
Three?
four decks, but where they're staggered.
But this one, we are going to need regardless, and so, to answer your question, yes, it's.
Okay.
It's not
I
gonna.
can save my argument for where the other parking garage is gonna go till later. All right, thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Mr. Scott?
When you said overlay is a bad word, but of course you're going to be doing the redeck, and you said there's a lot of other maintenance items. I mean, is 200,000 of it the overlay and 266,000 maintenance items? I mean, kind of give me a little, since we're talking about it, give me a little bit more on it.
I'll have to follow up with you to give you a little better breakdown of those numbers. I didn't come prepared to
Forget the
break those
numbers,
numbers
give me
for you,
some
but.
of what we're doing.
So, obviously, it's an old parking garage, and so with the water infiltration that happens over time, you wind up with cracks and those kinds of things. So we're repairing all the cracks in the structure. We're reworking some of the drainage. We have some ponding in the different decks, and so we have to address the drainage there. We're creating a small maintenance area underneath one of the ramps, as well as the overlay of the parking surface to stop that water infiltration through the deck.
Any electrical or lighting or anything that?
There's some lighting, but it's very minimal.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any other discussion? Any objection? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Item number 25, consideration of adopting a resolution of condolences to be forwarded to the family of the late Albert Prater. Mr. Beam.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a few comments. We lost Mr. Prater recently, and many of you, of course, knew Al. A little quick background, he started actually in 1974 with the parish as a road superintendent, or road inspector, excuse me. And it would take a long time to go through all the different things Al did for us, but there were many. And more, to try to give you a sense of an example of that, I got to know Al a lot closer when we asked him to run what was at the time a new government channel. So you go from all of the things in public works and think of what they do. The reason is because he was a true jack of all trades. Al could and did take on many things. He had a good audiovisual background, and through 2005, which is when he retired, he ran that. He did a good job, and we got off to a good start. But many people here could tell a lot of great stories about Al, but a couple of thoughts, is just he would do anything to try to help the citizens of Calcasieu. He was a true public servant. And on a personal note, I love talking history with him. He better, I think, than anybody I've met here, I've been here a long time now, could tell you stories about the way it used to be. And it makes you appreciate what some earlier folks had to go through to make sure we were served well. And I think he would enjoy tonight's meeting, hear about changes, and he could tell you about cattle guards and when we had those, and 20 dumps in the parish. And I think he'd be very proud to see what y'all have all done. And I just, on behalf of the staff, want to thank him for his service, and we're going to miss him. And
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Beam.
Good man.
Yes, he was. Our next item, please read the following. Please review the item printed below for your consideration. The chair will entertain a motion to suspend the
Move to
rules
suspend the rules.
to allow this item to be added to the agenda. I had a motion by Mr. Scott and a motion by Mr. Brain. Are there any comments from the public on adding this item to the agenda? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this agenda? Seeing none? If none, we'll now vote on the motion to suspend the rules and add this item to the agenda. All of those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 1, consideration of adopting a resolution ratifying the execution of a local government proclamation of pending state of emergency executed by President Guidry on August 23rd, 2017, which proclaimed a state of emergency to exist in the parish of Calcasieu and which activated all emergency preparedness plans with reference to the potential threat of heavy rain, flooding, high winds, power outage, and widespread damage to property from Tropical Storm Harvey. I had a motion by Mr. Scott and a second by Mr. White. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion on the floor? Aye. All opposed? Item 1 passes. At this time, I have Mr. Dick Grimiard, who would like to share with us a few comments. Mr.
Thank you,
Grimiard.
Mr. President. I know you've attended a few of the weather briefings. Several of the police jurors were there today. We're dealing with a very complex forecast on this storm, and I think yesterday pretty much everyone assumed that it was going to go into Texas and not be a problem for us, but that's changed as of today. The latest forecast actually has this storm tracking into Texas for about 20 miles, coming back offshore and then coming down the coast towards us. At the very least, we're going to get a lot of rain. They've upped the rain predictions today to 9 to 15 inches over the general area, with some concentrated areas, of course, being much heavier depending on how fast the system moves through. So the good news, if there's any, is that the threat has moved back to about Sunday now. It was scheduled to be here tomorrow night, but now it's going to be Sunday. Of course, the problem that causes, if we'd have gotten through the weekend, people don't have to go to work and things like that for the most part, but we will be dealing with heavy rain during business hours, 24 hours a day through probably Thursday. That's the latest forecast. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
We have
if
a few questions.
Someone has anything specific.
I have a few questions from the jurors. Vice President Grant.
I just have, you mentioned it going on shore for 20 miles or so and then coming back out in the Gulf and heading our way. Would it still be in hurricane at that point, or tropical storm?
It would come back off. Right now, what they're showing is coming back as a tropical depression, but it would increase in strength to a tropical storm once it gets offshore. Now, one thing I forgot to say is we thought that we were going to be free of the storm surge problem, but if this forecast holds true and this tropical storm heads back in our direction, it'll actually increase the storm surge predictions. And with it moving slowly along the coast like that, it could come up and stay up for several days.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, that creates a tremendous problem for Cameron Parish. I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, and Dick, thanks for all the meetings you're having and keeping the public informed. Mr. Wainwright, just so the public knows, our Public Works staff, crews are well on point. Could you maybe tell us some of your pre-storm preparations?
Yes, sir. Be glad to. Yeah, we've been preparing all week. We transitioned from routine early in the week to really, first priority is clean as many ditches and laterals from debris that we can spot. So we transitioned to that. We also began setting up sandbagging locations and all those things that go on, and preparing for, the next steps of the recovery, if you would. So our crews have transitioned. We have a plan. We had a plan in place to be ready to work all weekend. It will be active all weekend, but now we're sort of bumping that plan back as the timeline moves to be ready to go in much more force as we get more into the direct impact. So,
Thank you. Thank you for what your crews will be doing out there pretty much around the clock. Also, too, I just want to kind of caution the people of Calcasieu Parish to not drive through flooded streets and waterways. They are responsible for their wake, and if you push water into somebody's home, it's going to be a very bad situation. So we're asking the people to not drive through the flooded waterways. And we may not have every street barricaded off, but please use good common sense on this behalf.
at the scale of this event's potential, it could be very possible we can't quite possibly barricade everything off that needs it. So we definitely would ask for everyone to use extreme caution. And when we do have a barricade, please acknowledge that and allow those barricades to stay in place, and do what you can. And then we also ask, of course, if they see a problem out there, to go, call our emergency call out, call 911, and we'll be glad to begin a response as needed.
Thank you, Mr. Wainwright. Thank you, Mr. Gribion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. I think the biggest problem that we have and we see in Calcasieu Parish, people getting on ramps. They're a lot deeper than what I think they actually appear to be. Am I correct in saying that, Mr. Wainwright?
Well, there's so many scenarios. Some of our on-ramps definitely experience some flooding right at the ends of them, but, anytime you can't tell the depth, you really need to follow what we're all coached to, kind of turn around and not drown sort of thing. So be safe, and we're going to all be working to do what we can.
Thank you, Mr. Wainwright. Just a few minutes ago, we had received word from staff that our newly elected Mayor Hunter and his wife Becky just announced the new birth of their baby boy. I want to say the name is Harrison Edward Hunter. So we want to congratulate them on their new baby, our newly elected Mayor Hunter and his wife Becky. Congratulations.
Great personal privilege, and I'd like to go to Mr. Connors if I could, Mr. President.
Okay,
Mr. Connors, I know that we've been anticipating the opening of the Houston River Bridge right there just past Houston River Baptist Church. I know we're very near. I know this rain event may push us back from what we were hoping was going to be an opening in the next day or so. Can you give me some comment on that?
How we're shooting for tomorrow, but again, weather permitting, we've got a couple little things, and if weather will allow, we will do our very best to get that open tomorrow. Without any doubt, for sure, next week. But we've had a couple delays because of the weather, getting some contractors, some subcontractors in with the striping, and we did get the guardrail in. So I think that's a good possibility.
Once more asking the people of that area to be patient. We are going to try to get it open as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. White?
Question for Mr. Dick Grimion. The tidal surge that you're talking about, what kind of tidal heights are we looking at for above normal?
Right now, they're predicting something similar to what we had Tropical Storm Cindy, which would be 4 feet above mean sea level. Look for that to change. It depends on the forecast. If the storm moves closer to us, those values may go up.
Because I know a lot of people that, go off the tidal surge to know what they need to do to prepare for it, especially in Moss Bluff and all that. I appreciate that. Just to echo what Hal was talking about with Public Works, I've been on the phone with my field supervisors for 2 or 3 days now for preparing for this, and not only is Public Works doing it, but actually our our gravity drainage districts are as well. They're in emergency mode as well, looking at ditches, looking at laterals, helping one another out, spotting things, and they do a great job at that, and I appreciate y'all very much. I had some actually gravity drainage guys in the audience, but I guess they're left now, but they work hard for our district and our communities. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. White. Mr. Landry?
Oh, no, I'm good. I think I was just going to ask him, what was Ike in comparison?
Ike, 11 feet.
It was 11, and so this may be, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
this will not be an Ike event, but depending on what that storm does, if the tropical storm goes out in the Gulf, it could go up 2 or 3 feet,
Okay, thank you.
it would start to cause some major issues at that point.
Right.
And I'd like to follow up with one thing. There is a flood warning out for the Calcasieu River right now. That 4-foot storm surge that I'm talking about will increase the height of the river by that much. So that's not, that's a problem if we get a lot of rainfall on top of that.
Mr. Pointer?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think one of the most significant issues is the fact that we'll have this very heavy storm surge, and we're going to have a huge quantity of rain on top of that, where the water has nowhere to go. So I think that's probably the more significant. Cindy didn't have that much rain with it.
Right. That's correct.
Even Ike didn't have that much rain with it, and that's probably one of the most significant issues that we're faced with, is the huge amount of rain on top of the surge. So people need to really watch where they're going, make sure they don't drive off, like Mr. McMillan said. You don't know what kind of erosion has happened in that waterway when it's covered with water. So you might drive off into a hole that you can't see. You may think you know what the depth is, but you may not. So, thank you.
Mr.
I
McMillan?
think, Dick, too, we'll lend it to your expertise to tell us, like, when we need to shut down the rivers for boat traffic and stuff like that also.
Yes,
So
I've
know
already
you'll
had
work
some
with our president
discussion.
on that, but
We've already had some discussion with the sheriff about that.
thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
And again, thank you, Mr. Grimillon. Item number 27, consideration of going into executive session to discuss potential litigations involving BG Services Construction, LLC. Yes.